Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Wheel Reinvention Jam recap stream. So glad that you could all join us here today. I'm really excited about this. Ever since we started doing this jam recap for our Wheel Reinvention Jams, it's one of my favorite things that we do for the Handmade community every year. Along with the jam, of course, I love taking this opportunity to take a look at so many of the amazing projects that this community submitted and the amount of amazing work that people in this community can get done in just a week. So I should introduce myself. I'm Ben Visnes. I'm the lead of the Handmade community. I would like to tell you a little bit about this thing we call the Wheel Reinvention Jam. So if you are unfamiliar, the Wheel Reinvention Jam is a jam that we run every year here in the Handmade community. The idea is to build software from scratch. It's a general programming jam, not just a game jam. And participants have a week instead of just a weekend to put together some kind of project that does something from scratch. So we had so many amazing submissions this year. If you go to handmade.network/jam, you can see all of them. I have pasted the link in chat. And we are just going to take this opportunity today to look at a bunch of them, interview some of their creators, talk through the process, and just kind of celebrate all that amazing work that got done. So, without further ado, I think we're just going to jump right into our first interview. We'll be talking to Daniel Hooper. You may have heard Daniel's name before if you've been around the community for a while. Daniel is the creator of Principle.app, an animation and design app. He demoed at the very first Handmade Seattle back in 2019. And he participated in the jam this year with this cool project called ShapeUp. So, you good to go, Daniel? I think we're good to get these interviews rolling. So, I can hear you. Just wanted to make sure. So, welcome to the show, Daniel. So glad to have you. And correct me if I'm wrong, this is your first time participating in the Wheel Reinvention Jam, right?
Yeah. First one. I've seen the last ones, and this was the first one that I could actually join. It was super fun.
Yeah, I'm so glad you joined us. So, your project called ShapeUp, you have this demo here. I'll cut over to the screen share so that we can actually show it to everybody. So, could you just describe for us what ShapeUp is, I guess?
Sure. So at the base level, it's a 3D modeling program. So, if you want to create a model for a game or something for 3D printing, you could do it in this. And it was kind of an attempt to try to make a 3D modeler that didn't work with vertices and faces so that you didn't have to worry about your geometry at all, and just kind of see how that would play out. The technical term is it's a constructive solid geometry modeler. So it's just combining and subtracting shape.
Cool. So yeah, can you just demo creating some shapes and how they combine and that kind of thing? Because it's really, for those who haven't seen the more solid modeling style, this is interesting. In particular, there's operations that ShapeUp can do that I don't think other like solid modeling applications like CAD software can do, right?
Yeah, it's kind of using a different technique than you might see in other programs, and I can get into that now. So, you have your basic cube, and you can do the typical things you would expect, like resizing and moving, and you can add other shapes to it as well. And they show up on top of each other, and that's fine. And if you want to change them to be more round, you can do that. But you can also subtract shapes. So here we've subtracted the sphere from the rectangle, and you can see what that looks like. But the really cool thing is that you can blend them smoothly. So I can turn up the blobbiness of the sphere, and you see that it melds with the rectangle. And so this is something that you couldn't get with typical vertices and face, polygonal modeling. And so in addition to that, you can set the color for each shape, and you get this nice smooth blending between the different colors. So let's try modeling something basic. So let's say we'll make a wrench. So we'll give it a gray color. And this is just to kind of introduce the ideas of constructive solid modeling. So this will be the handle. I'm going to make it a little bit smoother. And then I'm going to add the end pieces. And so the way you make cylinders, at least right now, is because right now it only supports rounded cubes. But if you turn the roundness all the way up and extend it along one dimension, you can get a capsule. And you can mirror it. And then if we use the subtraction operation, we can remove the ends of these capsules. So I'll
I
cut
see.
out those capsules. And then if we mirror that cutout along the y-axis, you can see that we get these cylinders for the end of the wrench. And you notice I'm editing the shapes with a few different tools. I have the typical 3D Gizmo here. You have the property inspector on the left, but you can also edit using keyboard shortcuts. So you can hit G to grab, and you can hit R to rotate.
A Blender user,
You
I
can hit
see.
S to scale. Yeah. It got the Blender keyboard shortcuts. And if you want to lock it along a certain axis, you can, like I can hit X, and now it only moves along the X axis. I can hit Z, and it only moves along the Z axis. If I hit two of the axes quickly, I can move it along the ZX axis or the XY axis. Um, so kind of however you want to interact with it, I have the shortcuts for that. So let's continue on with our wrench modeling. So let's make the ends kind of smoothly mesh into the handle.
It's so amazing that you can
And
do that. Like, as somebody who has used like traditional CAD software for a while, being able to just, smooth over the seam between a couple objects is just so nice.
yeah, and I've used other 3D programs, and I always find the whole working with a topology really annoying. It's like, oh, I want to split it here, but then these vertices aren't in the right spot. And for me personally, I find that this way of editing just kind of matches my brain better, I guess.
Right.
Just adding and subtracting shapes. So we can add this cutout for the end, and we'll almost be done with the wrench. And I'll just finally mirror it in X. And there's our crudely modeled wrench. But you can actually do a lot more than just these simple shapes. So, I have saving, so I'll pull in some things that I made in the past. So here we have our Mario character. I only got as far as the head. I also made a Among Us character. And then I went really crazy and I tried to do Mike from Monsters Inc.
Yeah, this
And
is this is amazing. I
so I
saw
think
I
this,
saw you share this on Twitter. And yeah, it
yeah,
is.
I think this just goes to show how far you can go with it.
Yeah, no, it's really really impressive. Now, what are the actual techniques being used for this modeling? It reminds me a lot of the like Inigo Quilez's SDF demos. Is this an SDF thing behind the scenes?
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. So the everything you're seeing is rendered using just two triangles that cover the whole screen, and all the magic happens inside the shader. So it's all the Inigo Quiles magic. And I'm glad you mentioned that because I actually have this feature here to show the sign distance
Yes.
field.
Yes.
So you can see this is kind of what the renderer sees. You can see as you get further away from the object, the sign distance field gets bigger, and then the red shows the negative portion of the sign distance field. Um, and let me show you. It's kind of cool to see what is going on when you are blending shapes. So I will turn up the
Ooh.
blobbiness of this cube, and you can see kind of how that affects the sign distance
Oh,
field
yeah, okay.
internally.
Oh, it's so nice
Um,
to see it interactive like that because I don't think I've actually seen I've seen kind of this rings SDF demo, visual before. and I've seen like the smooth blending, but I hadn't seen them sort of put together like that and made interactive. It makes sense, I guess, why you would get that kind of smoothing then. But looks so nice to
Yeah,
see that
and
demo.
I,
Now, how did it pick? Can you like? It's a 2D slice of the sign distance field, I guess, right? Is that just like you
right,
can pick which one
right.
you're viewing along or something?
Right now, it shows you the XY plane
Gotcha.
through the origin of the world, and so yeah, you're right. It's just flat, and I can move things in and out of the plane. So here, the cube is not through the plane, and there's no negative area. You know, see the red is inside the cube, and
Right.
now it's not there. Um, but I thought it was cool. You can see like here's kind of a point where either direction you go, it either is closer to this or closer to this.
Right.
But if you turn up the blobbiness, it kind of starts to blur that line. So that,
Ah. Until they
and
meet in
that's
the
kind of
middle
how the
because
blurriness
they've yeah, okay.
happens.
That's so cool.
Right, right. Yeah. So for me, I found this like a good way to kind of understand what's happening. But I actually use this uh, field for a lot of different things. So, you know, I use it for selection. So if you just do the naive thing for selecting, um, it doesn't really work with the cutouts. Like you might click in the mouth
Right.
here and it might select the cutout, or like this tooth is mirrored. And if you click on the mirror, like you want it to select the the original object, you know? So actually, when you click, I render the whole scene in a false color, and each object gets its own color. So I can see what color is the pixel under your mouse, and then that's how I
Okay.
decide which shape you're selecting.
Interesting. Yeah, I hadn't thought
Um,
about that like object picking aspect of it, but yeah, that it makes sense that you'd have to solve for some interesting problems like that. Now, to confirm, you did all this in
yeah,
a week, right?
yeah, yeah. This
That
was
is
one
amazing.
week's worth of work.
That is an amazing accomplishment. What is am I seeing a little export button up there? Is that something that
It- yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that.
so this I
So
like
I actually
go ahead.
I
Go ahead.
use
Sorry.
the sign distance field to do marching cubes on the sign distance field. So you can hit export; it'll spit out an OBJ file, which you can pull into Blender. You
In a
could pull
week?
into a 3D printing slicer. So I wanted to 3D print this to hold up the 3D print, but I didn't have time. But yeah, so you can model something here and then spit it out into any of your other 3D programs, and put it in your game or rig it and animate it. So it really does kind of have the full workflow in it, I guess.
That's amazing. Now, this
And
is a
I
lot.
have
This is a lot to
one
oh,
bonus
okay.
feature to
Okay.
show
Okay.
you.
Sorry.
So this was kind of done just for you because I know how much you like uh, Dreams on PlayStation. So
Yes, this is
I
true.
was actually up last night um, adding controller support. So as soon as
Okay.
you uh, start using the controller, it switches into controller mode, and it's just so much easier to move in 3D with the controller.
Yeah.
So a lot of the editing controls are here. You can grab shapes and move them around with the controller. You can scale them. You can turn
Wow.
up and down the radius. Um, so I found that just by having a lot more of the dimensions from the controller makes it a lot easier to edit these things than just a keyboard and mouse. So
Yeah,
um,
I never thought about using a game controller as like a 3D mouse, but I know that a lot of like CAD professionals will use a 3D mouse of some kind to, make that navigation easier cuz yeah, having to do purely mouse and keyboard feels really limiting and you end up doing that weird trackball rotation thing to try and like orient the model a certain way. So, yeah.
right, yeah,
But
yeah. And I
that's a
think
cool idea.
ultimately yeah, I think ultimately it'd be really cool to have ShapeUp in a VR headset, because then you have the 6 degrees of control for each controller and the head. And part of the project is trying to see if I could simplify 3D modeling, and
Right.
managing a camera and figuring out the 3D cursor and stuff is difficult for a lot of people. So I think VR would kind of eliminate all those issues.
Yeah. I mean that would be amazing, but this is already an incredibly impressive achievement for 1 week. I'm so glad that you decided to participate in the jam and to explore this avenue. So I believe Asaf posted the link in chat before. So if you want to learn more about this, then you can go look at the Handmade Network project submission. And how can people find your work elsewhere? I mentioned Principle, but you should probably explain what that is a little bit.
Yeah. So my day job or main gig is I started a program called Principle, which is a 2D UI prototyping tool, and I've been working on that for a few years. If you want to check that out or anything else that I do, you can go to danielchasehooper.com, or my Twitter, or I guess X handle is Daniel C. Hooper. So I've been posting about ShapeUp and the stuff I've been doing with Principle. So if you're into graphics, you might be into what I'm doing.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. I appreciate it. So next we're going to look at a project by Amin Mesbah called Organette, which is a music box app for the Playdate.
Hi, my name is Amin Mesbah, and this thing here is a handheld gaming console called the Playdate, and for my Jam project, I wrote a program that runs on it called Organette. The screen is a bit hard to film, so I'm using a mirroring app to make it easier to see what's going on. The idea for Organette was to make a virtual music box that lets you compose and play simple songs. This is a song I actually transcribed by hand in code in order to have something to play while getting initial playback working. Playback just uses the Playdate's crank. My main goal for the jam was to get some kind of basic but usable song editor working. So here's how that works. At any time, press A to enter editing mode. You can use the D-pad to switch between tracks, or jump between the time interval markers. And you can put a note down on any existing track with the A button. And of course you can use the crank to put a note anywhere you like, even if it's not directly on a marker. And if you want to delete a note, you can long hold B. To see the rest of the editor, let's start a new song from scratch. So if you want to add a note that hasn't been used in a song yet, you can long press A to enter a note selection mode. And you can select different notes with the crank. You can see I didn't make a UI for this part yet. So let's add a couple more notes. And that's what I had implemented by the end of the week. Surprisingly, even this bare-bones editor is enough to have a fun time making music. I've spent about 3 hours transcribing songs in the editor so far, and it's been enjoyable, though I do wish I had implemented file saving. Of course, there's a lot of work still to be done to turn this into a polished product. But in implementing the simple version, I've learned about how the Playdate's limited controls can still allow for a relatively rich editing experience. This was the first time I did a programming jam. It was a really good opportunity for me to practice moving quickly and working incrementally, which are two very valuable skills that aren't usually natural parts of my programmer temperament. It also gave me the nudge I needed to actually try implementing my idea. I'm interested in doing something like this again, perhaps with some more preparation and a more ambitious project. Thanks a lot to the Handmade Network admins for organizing this.
Yep.
All right, that was Organette. Thanks so much to Amin for making that. I'm here now with Abec, the creator of a build server project called Aura. And actually, Abec has participated in this jam before, and is one of our Handmade Network project creators. He's most well known in the community for making a version control system called Dark Files, and his new project here seems like an interesting complement to that. So, welcome, Abec. How are you doing?
Hi, Ben.
Let's jump over to see Aura in action here. So I've got it up on stream. Why don't you show everybody around?
Sure. Yeah, as you said, I also work on a version control system called Dark Files, and that is also where Orca came from. So I was looking for a build server to integrate into Dark Files, and I didn't find anything that was good enough, so I had to build my own. Yeah, let's tour through Aura. This is the main page of Aura. It has two parts: the controller, which has the web interface, which you can see here.
Actually, one moment. I want to interrupt. I don't think that the screen share is active right now. I think
this isn't active.
Oh wait, now it's working.
Great.
Now it's working. I'm sorry. Continue.
All right. Okay. So yeah, web interface. That's the controller. That's the main part. And then there are runners, and those are there's a runner status page here. What a runner is the tool responsible for actually executing the individual build jobs. So in this case, you can see I have 3 runners that are offline. No runners that were recently checked in. Also no tags that recently checked in. Tags in Aura are a way to figure out which build job should be able to run on which run. Yeah, also on here is the queue page. In this case, there are 3 jobs queued. They were created some time ago. All of this, by the way, is part of the demo data. So if you download Aura, you can run the controller simply with the flat-demo, and it'll come with all of this data included. So you can just start and poke around in it. Now, what is such a build job? I've got one here. In this case, the job doesn't have a log. That's because the demo data doesn't have any job logs in it. But everything your job command would write to standard out and standard error would show up here. There's also a bit of metadata, just like what you would expect. We can also see the tag down here. As I said, the tag is something to figure out which runner a job should run on. And in this case, the job is looking for something running on Docker, which doesn't actually exist yet, but who cares? And on the Linux operating system, because this is a Linux build job. Right. What you can also see here is this part up here, which is the place where this job is actually situated. There's a project, obviously. In this case, I've put Orca as a demo project there. And then there's this entity. And the entity is one of the interesting things about Aura. Entity is a key value pair. In this case, we have commit as the key and hash as the value. And one such entity, if we click on this thing, as you can see, can contain a bunch of jobs.
Okay, so is the entity kind of how what would be examples of other entities besides a commit?
Okay. Yeah, so the entity, the goal of the entity is to just group jobs inside a project. With an entity, like this is a commit entity, but you could have more entities. The idea is, obviously, if you have a version control system, you would use commit for commit hash, or if it's a centralized one, you would have a revision with a revision ID. But there can be more. For example, this one also has nightly as an entity. And in this case, there are some nightly jobs. And as you can see, the the entity key. The place where this job is attached is always the date. And this is, in this case, one nightly build job that's run.
I see.
Right, then there would obviously be other options. This one doesn't have any other. But depending on where your sources for jobs come from, you could have stuff like if your jobs come from a feed. So for example, you're following an RSS feed and you want to download every post there, then the ID inside that feed could be an entity. This one also has another thing in the middle here, and that is the so-called entity collection. That is a superset of entities. So in this case, if you click on one of these, you can see it has 3 entities in it. And the goal in this case is for merge requests, just put all commits that are part of the merge request in there. And
I
so
see.
if you're reviewing, if you're reviewing merge request 1, you would probably have a bot commenting this exact URL in the merge request somewhere, and you can always find the latest results.
Right. And from what I've seen of other build systems, those are often, it's just like another type of job, right? Like it's not necessarily easy to see how jobs are related to each other.
Yeah, exactly. When other build systems would use stuff like pipelines, Aura just has this abstract concept called an entity where you can attach jobs to. But this allows for some great things. For example, in this case, we have 6 build Linux jobs because the first 5 of them failed. So after the first one failed, I couldn't make any code changes because this is still the same commit. But let's assume that the infrastructure failed or something. And so I could just queue another build Linux job into this exact commit and then find it in here. It's explicitly not a pipeline because pipelines are complicated.
Yeah, well, I wanted to chat with you about that because the model that people are probably used to for build servers or CI these days is probably something like GitHub Actions or something along those lines. And I'm curious what it looks like to actually set jobs up and how you approach the design of these build systems to maybe try to avoid some of the complexity of that, or what parts do you keep and what parts do you change?
Yeah. The thing is, so for everyone who doesn't know what a pipeline is, normally build servers would trigger such a pipeline on a commit. And a pipeline then creates a bunch of jobs, similar to the list of jobs you see here. All of these are created at once. In many modern version control systems, a pipeline is either a YAML file or some weird subset of a programming language like Python or Scala. And then the people who use YAML figured out that YAML isn't programmable, and now they have YAML that has ifs in it. And as you can probably see, that can get complicated really quickly, and pipelines in general just get complicated. If you're using YAML, you have anchors in YAML, you have several YAML files. You could have templates that produce YAML files, or YAML files loaded from separate repos. Version control CI systems like GitLab also has child pipelines, so a single pipeline or a job in one pipeline can start another pipeline. So pipelines are either really simple or it's so complicated that no one actually understands the whole thing. I've got a feeling there isn't actually a thing in the middle. And then for a second thing, obviously you have vendor login. So if you're using GitLab for CI, well, you have GitLab CI YAMLs in your project, and porting that to another version control system will be a pain in the butt. Yeah. And for the third thing, why pipelines are bad, the thing is, everything that runs in the CI, you also want to run locally. Like, of course, you're running your build jobs and your unit tests if you have those locally. But in general, everything that should be able to run in the CI, you also should be able to run locally. If locally, it might be a collection of shell scripts, or I don't know, a parameterized Python script, or maybe you actually have a big build tool like Bazel, whatever it is. But all of these tools or collections of files or whatever, they contain the same information as your pipeline. So it's duplicate work. And so with these 3 things in mind, pipelines are really complicated. You're locked into your build system, and you have duplicate work between client and server. The idea is, what are we doing about that? And I decided, well, we're not doing any pipelines. So there's only a single source of truth, and that is the tool you use locally. So if you have a tool that, like the tool you have, generally has a list of all the things it can do. If you have something like Bazel, for example, that has a command where you just output the entire tree structure of all your jobs, and if you're running your own tool, then you can quickly add something that outputs some sort of listing with all your jobs. And the idea here is you have a single job that figures out what all these jobs are in your build system, and then actually submits these as CI jobs.
Oh, interesting. Now,
so
I'm curious. Can
I've
those
modeled
be...
this here, actually.
Okay. Sorry, go ahead.
I've modeled this here, actually. I've got this prepared job. As I said, it doesn't have any log files. I've got one right at the beginning, I think, somewhere. Where is it? This one, yeah. So I've got a mock-up. This is a mock-up I created on the first day of the jam. The idea here was, this is the exact same prepare job that generates all the other jobs. In this case, it would generate all these and then output the IDs that these jobs have, and they would all end up in the queue.
I see. So is the model within Aura then that instead of defining all of the jobs up front in some kind of, YAML or other data description thing and having to add a bunch of constructs for conditionals and artifacts moving between jobs, you can just have like jobs that can create other jobs, and the server is just simple in that regard. It just accepts jobs as part of is it an entity or as part of some collection and then just runs them? Sure. That makes sense. I think that seems like a sensible model.
The other advantage of that is, you said you don't need to define your jobs. I don't quite agree, because you're defining your jobs in your build tool, so they're defined already. And the setup you build with Aura is just using that same information.
Sure. Well,
there's also another advantage. You can quite easily leave out jobs that are unnecessary. So if you commit only updated documentation, you don't need to run any unit tests, and you don't need to create any jobs for unit tests.
So take me through that. So what would you like? Why would you not need to create jobs for that, I guess?
If there weren't any changes, like if there were no changes in the code, running a unit test is not necessary.
Oh, I see.
Because there can't have been anything that changed.
I see. So you're leveraging the knowledge of builds that your build system already has in order for your build server to do less redundant work as well.
Yeah. So in this mockup, I've hidden this in here. This would change. This would switch to a given commit, because obviously the commit to test here might not actually be the latest one. And this one then, in this case, actually there has a finding change files. So I would assume that your tool will somehow configure this out and then find out which build jobs are actually needed to be submitted.
Cool. Well, I think that's just about all the time we have to look at this, but this is a very cool project and something that I will definitely be looking at. I've really enjoyed seeing you dive into these version control and build tools and all of these like code infrastructure tools that I've had to struggle against for so many years in different companies and on different projects. It's really cool to see your take on it and this sort of like handmade ethos take on it. And I'm so glad you're working on this stuff. So thanks so much for joining us. Thanks for participating in the jam.
Yeah.
And the next thing that we're going to show is a project called Lux Editor by Samuel Deboni, Gilles Donassis, and Igor Fagundes, some of whom have also participated in past jams, and we can link to their profiles in a bit here, but let's air the video of Lux Editor.
Hi, for this year's jam, we created a project called Lux Editor. The project is a sprite editor that simulates dynamic lighting in a pixel art friendly way. Pixel art as a style is derived from the limitations of older hardware, having to deal with small color palettes. To imitate this style with dynamic lighting, each pixel of the sprite has a material layer, a normal layer, and an attenuation layer, creating a .lux file. Each material has a set color palette. From this palette, the shader selects the adequate color according with the scene lights, the normal values and attenuation values. The normal layer is used to edit the sprite's normal map, simulating the overall 3D volume of the shapes. For finer details, the attenuation layer can be used to darken specific pixels. Alongside the editor, a shader to render the .lux format was also developed, enabling the use of the sprites outside the editor. And now we are going to show some clips in order to demonstrate the editor capabilities. In the near future, we plan to use the .lux format in game development, especially in a game we are currently working. And also, if there is enough demand, we could improve the editor and make it available for people to use in their own games. And that's it. Thanks for viewing our project.
All right. I am now here with Shaw, who goes by bitwitch on Discord. Welcome to the show. And Shaw, you did an interesting project for this year's jam, which funny enough came from an idea that I had discussed on Discord a year or two ago. I don't even know. Why don't you go ahead and introduce people to what we're talking about here today?
Yeah, sure, definitely. Yeah, it's interesting explaining your idea back to you, but
It's not to me. It's
the
not to
basic
me.
well, the basic idea was that it was spawned from your discussions that like in Handmade, often we have these voice chats or coffee chats, and typically what happens when they get large is one of two things. Like either a few people are talking and dominating the conversation while everyone else is silent, or everybody's talking over each other at the same time and it's complete chaos. And this is in contrast to the in-person gatherings with Handmade, where typically what happens is you have smaller groups of conversations where people can sort of flow between them when they overhear something interesting and join that sort of dynamic. And so the idea was to sort of mirror that online and also to leverage the tools that Discord already has, like their voice stuff. And so the idea was a very simple 2D proximity chat where you can drag your avatar around and it will dynamically change the volume as you do so.
Yeah, and I've got it up on my end here because that's just how we decided to do it. Let me resize things so that it fits a little bit better. It's a little bit bigger for everybody. So yeah, take me through this here. We've got this grid here, including a bunch of people who are like sitting in another channel waiting to come on the show. But I think it should still work, right?
Yeah, so make sure you click it again so that it refreshes. But what's going on here is, everyone who's in a voice channel, anyone, because it doesn't have a notion of specific channels yet, but it populates this canvas with all of the avatars of everyone who's in the voice channel, and each local user, so this is happening through a browser extension. There's two pieces. There's the browser extension that does all of the visuals and dynamically changes volumes, and then there's a WebSocket server that handles all the networking. And so each local user can click on their avatar and drag it around. And so I'm dragging myself now. You guys should be able to see that. I'll try
Oh
to
no,
stay
I'm
near
not
you
seeing it on
because
my end.
oh really?
But
I'm
I
seeing
am.
you getting dragged around.
Oh yeah, okay. Well, I could hear you getting quieter though. So yeah, why don't you keep talking and I'll drag my avatar around and you can kind of like explain. I'd love to hear you explain like how did you even make this work? I like how is it possible to just sort of hack this in?
Yeah, sure. Well, it's working as a browser extension, and so you can inject code into the Discord page, and basically what the browser extension has to do is mirror the behavior that an actual user would do to change volume, right? And so what that looks like is a user would have to right click on some name in the voice channel list, which opens up a context menu. And then there's a little volume slider that appears there that they can drag to change the volume. And so I just mirror that action programmatically. I went through a number of iterations to figure out like what would work, but it's basically just dispatching a context menu event on the user. So let's say like I'm a certain distance away from you at this moment. It would dispatch an event to so to step back, the window is hard coded right now to be 500 by 500 pixels, and then there's a hard coded fall off distance. I think it's like 300 pixels right now. So and everything in between there is just a linear volume change, and so the distance between the user and you will be calculated, and whatever percentage that is what the volume will be set at. The context menu event is dispatched to open that user's context menu, and then whatever distance the volume is along the slider, it dispatches a mouse down event there, which jumps the volume there, and then closes the context menu.
No, but wait,
Um,
really? That's what's happening behind the scenes, even though I'm not seeing that happen as I'm dragging this around?
yeah, and I believe the reason for that is because so Discord is using React, and I'm not super knowledgeable about React, but what I do understand is like all of the state changes are done by calling set state. And my understanding is it batches changes together so that it can minimize calls to the DOM. So I believe what's happening is like um, all of those changes are being set, but visually it doesn't have to dispatch the you're
Oh
not
my
seeing the
god.
context
Right.
menus wildly fly open and go because by the time it's all done, like it knows that the context menu doesn't need to be open, so it doesn't show that visually.
That's amazing. Now I'm gonna have to play with this. Because you can use like the React Dev tools and stuff. Actually, profiling is probably not enabled, but I'm gonna have to play with this. Like that is hilarious. See, you said before, I think, in like one of your mid jam updates that you were using context or like accessibility shortcuts or something.
Yes. Yeah, my first iteration was I I couldn't get my first thought right was okay, you just do a mouse down event on the grabber, you do like mouse move events to move it and then mouse up to release. And that didn't work. And so I was thinking, well, maybe I can do keyboard controls. And I found that if you focus on the grabber and then just spam arrow key events, then it would control it. So that was my first iteration, but it was very janky and well, it's still janky, but that was even more janky and it didn't work well when there's multiple users at the same time moving around.
Hmm.
But yeah, I switched to I found that if you just do a mouse down like on the slider bar, the volume will jump there and like their React app will pick up that change.
That's fantastic. Now, actually, because I would love to show things moving around, and if the WebSocket server is working on your end, are you
hmm
actually able to screen share on your side as well? Would that be possible, do you think?
Sure, yeah. I got the thing pulled up.
All
Let me
right.
see if it'll work.
Yeah, let me shuffle some screen share stuff around behind the scenes here. Cuz yeah, if you are in the screen share software, then we can show that because I would love if, I mean, I know that this is cursed. I know that this is jank, as people in the
Yeah.
chat are saying, but it's also like amazing to have it working at all and to have it interacting with the, other features of Discord in that way. Like it's so cool to be able to take advantage of all of that client-side mixing goodness that Discord already does to be useful for this kind of thing. So, all right, are you good to go on your end? Oh no, I don't hear you anymore. Did we break the Discord call because of mic things in this other software? Was this a mistake?
That's sharing.
Oh, I can hear you again now. No, except I can't. Damn it. Oh no. I'm sorry about this, everybody. He'll be back momentarily. Hopefully this fixes it. We've both had issues throughout this entire process because we're using Firefox for all of the Discord calls for this. And
Hey, can you hear me now?
I can hear you, yes.
All right, yeah. As soon as I started the screen share, it wasn't working. So.
All right. Well, also now I need to do the juggle on my end too. So, one second. Well, we won't be doing that demo, but that's okay. We'll just chat about this a little bit longer and save all of that fun stuff for another time. So, is this available for people to play with? Because it works like as is, even without your WebSocket server running, right?
Yeah, I did make a like local only version where you can control everybody's avatar yourself and move around. So locally it works. Yeah, you can find it on my GitHub, just github.com/bitwitch. Yeah, and like as you said, this is super like janky. That's not the way you'd want to implement this. I think the way you'd actually want to do that is like they have an API to communicate with like an RPC server that allows you to like locally control like a Discord client. I looked into that, but it's like currently unavailable. So that's what you'd want besides having to do this like really cursed interacting with the DOM directly.
Sure. Well, even so, this is amazing to see as a proof of concept, if nothing else. I would love if like we could somehow use this someday for our Handmade conversations and stuff, because it was, directly inspired by that. I'll actually be talking about Handmade Seattle at the end of the stream here, but we tried to do some Handmade Seattle social things on the Discord, like especially in 2020 when the conference was all remote, and it just turns into a podcast in there, like with two people unmuted and everybody else is going around. Yeah, I mean, honestly, like I'm looking at what I Make Music is saying in the chat, and like I would love if Discord just added this, right? Like it'd be cool. But in the meantime, it's amazing that we can actually like play with it and just sort of see if the idea works. So super cool project. Thanks so much for making my goofy idea a reality, and I'm so glad that it actually worked out so well. So thanks again for coming on. Anything else? I guess you already shouted out your GitHub, right? So, and his
yeah, that's all I really got.
Again.
You can look at my code there.
Never mind. Who knows? Now I can hear you. I don't know.
No.
Thanks for being on the show. We're gonna end these technical nightmares here. And
sorry for all the hiccups.
You're all good. You're all good. So yeah, we are now going to hop over to a demo called Saw, which is one of many music programs that were done during this jam, actually. We already saw Organette, and now let's take a look at Saw. All right, thanks Deleuze for making that project. Now, the next project, before we get into the interview, the next project is called Halcyon, and it is an interesting, like, there's a lot of concepts to think about with this. So what the author Quentin has done, you may know Quentin as Simp or Simpalaxy or Buff Movie Buff or a number of other names from the Discord. He has put together a video demo for that as well. And so then after we play that, we'll be talking about it. So here is the brief video demo for Halcyon.
Hey, for this year's Reinvention Jam, I decided that I was going to reinvent the REPL, or sort of the live environment for creating values and programs. And in this case, I'm just doing some arithmetic examples to start off with. But the idea is that you should be able to take pieces of code and stick them together and create new definitions, just like you would do in, like, let's say a Python REPL or something like that, like creating a function, but then also be able to pull that code back apart and see how it works in the live environment without ever having to switch over into some sort of text mode. So as an example here, we start with an empty context, and then we sort of put some zeros down, and then we add 1 and add 2 to those results, right? So these are sort of primitive little operations that we've created. But let's say that you wanted to multiply 2 values together and then duplicate double the result, right? So as an example, let's go ahead and grab the multiplication operation, and as you can see, all the arithmetic operators have a sort of example-based representation to start off with. So if we pull off multiplication, which is shown by multiplying 3 and 5 together, we get an example, but you'll see that the 5 and the 3 are not actually part of the definition, so we just have multiplication here. But we can see how the operation would change values over time, given some examples. Okay, so let's start by, let's duplicate the result there, and then let's say that we add the 2 values that have been created. Now, we have a chain of multiplication, duplication, and then adding here, which is going to effectively multiply 2 values together and then double it. So we can take that operation that we've created and add a new definition here. Let's call it mul and double. Seems like an appropriate enough name as any. And now this operation can be used when creating other pieces of code. So as an example, let's start with 0 here. And inside of this new environment, we will, let's say, put 6s. Now, before we put down 6s, let's actually see how that operation works. Inside this operation, you can see that we just add 2 3 times, and then put another 0 down, and then add 2 3 times again. And in the case of where you had a 2 sitting on the stack initially, you would end up with 6 and 8. Now going back to our 0 here, if we applied put 6s to that, obviously it's going to give us 2 6s, right? Because it adds 6 to the value that's already on there, and then just places another 6 by itself. Okay, and then we can apply our multiply and double value from earlier, and we can see that you get what you'd expect. 6 times 6, 36, and then we double the result. And that code, imagine that you were looking at this code in another context. Somebody sort of, used this in a live environment and said, okay, I want you to see how this piece of code works. We can then take that multiply and double that they created and pull that open and say, okay, how does that piece of code work? And we can see how the implementation works. So that's sort of how the environment works for the practice of just a bunch of arithmetic, but we can actually use it in other contexts, including interactive ones.
All right. So interesting. So this is actually my first time watching through that video because it was finished up just in time for our recap stream here. So to start off, is this fourth? Is this fourth thing that you've been telling me about for so long?
It may or may not be that fourth thing. I guess that's only it is fourth in a sense, but before there was fourth, there were RPN calculators.
Yeah.
So old calculators used to use stacks, where you would stack up the numbers instead of putting them into sort of temporary registers or something like that, because it made the implementation of old calculators a lot easier. And so the idea of RPN, or reverse Polish notation, is that you list the values first and then you apply the operations. But if you sort of extend that into being a more general programming language, yeah, you'd end up with a programming language called Forth, which is came out around the same time as C, for instance. I think it's a couple years earlier. And basically, you use the stack as a place to put your intermediate values. But here, I'm trying not to address it as a stack exactly, because I think a more complicated or a more visually oriented version of the system should work more like a pipeline, sort of flow of values over time. and you could like apply an operation to any set of or any little chunk of values in your little context, your little sequence of values, as opposed to just having to apply it at the top, right?
Right. So to check my understanding on how this whole thing works, each of the things that we're seeing at the top here is, what do you call them here? To me, I mean, it feels sort of like a function, but it's, I guess, a pipeline. Was that the term you used? It's this set of operations that you can apply to any stack.
Right. So it's just an operation chain, right? But traditionally, the you would think of it as called a word, because in Forth, you see each of those operations is named. A word is defined in terms of other words, so you're just making up this dictionary of a bunch of operations, and so
Okay.
you can mix and match them different ways, and that's the whole thing, right? So they called them words, but yeah, in this context, I'm trying not to call them words because we want to get away from some of the Forth jargon and try to make it more of an intuitive representation of things, like examples, like, we sort of start from one place and we get to the next place, kind of a thing.
Sure. So how did you pick the like primitives, I guess, that the program launches with, I imagine?
So the primitives in this case are just some really basic things that I wanted to do for arithmetic because I didn't want to lose anybody. But you can totally use any. You could put other data types on the stack, like for instance, I had rectangles that you could sort of overlay onto the screen and stuff like that, or you had like a dial that you could sort of switch between a value between 0 and 1 or something like that. So there's lots of different kinds of things that you can put on the stack. But any, you could have a pointer to data, or in traditional Forth systems, you could actually access memory straightforwardly, and you just get a pointer on the stack that you then can store into some data structure or whatever else, doing normal programming stuff. It's just that instead of having values stored inside of registers, you instead have them stored on the stack, right? Or in some sort of data structure that you don't name explicitly, but rather chains, the chains of operations sort of implicitly are threading operations through, right? And applying to the same data structure over time.
So with that in mind, then, so you said you had rectangles and stuff. I believe you said in your Jam submission that you had some other like visual ambitions for this. Can I ask first, what's this software built in?
So this one's just built inside of something called Love, or Love 2D. And that's a little framework that lets you make graphical applications and games and stuff like that in Lua. The nice thing about Lua is that it's very easy to embed into other applications. So this module should be something that you can sort of reuse in, like, let's say, a game engine or something like that, to give you an environment where you could like do scripting, but like a visual scripting where you're interacting with, say, a touchscreen or something like that, instead of having to bring a keyboard around with you, right?
Right. So and I guess, let's see. So would you imagine this being used for, like, I guess, I mean, I can see how it could be used for basically anything. Did you have a particular application in mind beyond just like, did you want people to be able to make games or modify existing things or just make little debug visuals? I'm curious what your sort of motivations were here.
Well, so in some sense, you want to be able to do that. You want to be able to bring different aspects of programming together. So a good example would be that in a REPL environment, you are able to evaluate expressions and then, set things in your environment. So you're sort of writing code and also debugging the code or running the code at the same time, piecemeal, right? Here, we're also visualizing and documenting the code as well. So like I said earlier, we could sort of take that multiply and double operation and break it back open and see how it's made, right? How the different operations that make up that operation. You could imagine that if you had visuals that were representing the stack over time, like say you had a rectangle and showed how it got cut into pieces or something like that, you could actually have the code be simultaneously something that you're running, but also something that you're visualizing and exploring that code, so that you're, what's the right way to put this? You're sort of documenting the code at the same time that so the code is documented by the visuals, right? And you can sort of throw different examples at it to see what that piece of code does in isolation, and then see how it fits into the bigger whole and stuff like that. So it's sort of an explorable code base, kind of like a learnable sort of coding, right? So instead of coding being this thing that you do, you implement the thing. Instead, it's something that you can sort of break up into pieces and sort of say, okay, how does this function work in isolation? So like, let's say you had like 2 grids for like a Tetris game or something like that, and you wanted to see whether or not 2 blocks were going to intersect, right? So that it would like, stop falling or something like that. You could sort of test that little piece of code that does that check by itself, and then see how that fits into the bigger whole, but use lots of different examples to see how the chunks of code work together to build up the bigger piece. And you sort of start at the high level of like, what's the whole gameplay loop? And then you can sort of break it down. Somebody in chat asked, kind of like Factor. It's exactly like Factor. I'm basically trying to do something that's very similar to the Factor programming language, but when a more visual context so that you don't have to type any code. And ideally, you'd be able to actually interact with the code so that writing code doesn't require typing at all, right? It would just sort of be a completely visual environment. At least that's sort of the principle I'm going for.
Yeah, and this is so interesting to me because, as you know, and as Daniel mentioned earlier, I've done a bunch of stuff with Dreams, and the types of workflow things you're talking about were the things that I enjoyed most about my time in Dreams, because I would make some little microchip, some chunk of the Dreams visual logic, but then I could like snap that onto different objects. I could test stuff by just like, well, let me drag this object over here and just like bump it into things, or let me just like wire a switch up to this and just like probe this wire, test this little behavior of it. But it's so much easier than in our typical programming workflows where you have to like set up kind of this whole test environment, test harness. It's like the code actually has so many assumptions about, like, more than if you have a particular function that you want to call, there's more assumptions about what it needs than just the parameters, right? Because there's like also the entire computer underneath it that is allowing you to run the code at all. You just don't quite get the same benefit.
Right. So this is actually sort of an interesting idea is in like time traveling debuggers, right? Like RR or something like that. Part of how they try to accomplish making debugging a nicer experience is that they basically take any chunk of execution between 2 points of non-determinism, and sort of by definition between that is determinism, and they record what happens before and after that little chunk of non-determinism. Usually it's something like a syscall or something like that. And then the idea is that you can replay the code from there on out, and it's totally deterministic, right? In a traditional programming language, it's sort of difficult to maintain those sorts of things because you have to sort of pass around this environment that tells you what all the values for everything are at that step in the program. But with a concatenated programming language like this, your parameters are something that you are always you're always implicitly passing them around. So you don't need to have name value environments everywhere to capture everything. Instead, you can just have sort of the entire data structure, let's say, sitting on the stack. Right? In this case, I did some arithmetic to keep things straightforward to follow. But in a more complicated example, you might imagine that you have like an entire sort of game state on the stack, and then you're like grabbing different pieces of that game state and changing them, and then updating them, and passing that around and doing operations on that game state over time, as opposed to having to sort of get different pieces of that game state and put those into a particular function or something like that. You end up with you end up with a computational model that corresponds to the idea of a live environment much nicer, because actually the code itself is just a live environment that you can edit, right? So like doing all of your data and your code are sort of stored in this big image, very similar to something like Smalltalk, right? And certainly something like Smalltalk inspired projects like Dreams in terms of their object oriented, not in the class sense of object orientation, but object oriented in this sort of environment where different things are sending signals to each other, right? I think Dreams sort of works that way, and I think this model actually could support that kind of thing quite well, where the words themselves have a sort of internal state. They are pieces of code, but they're also pieces of data that can get updated and send signals to other pieces of code within the big dictionary, basically, right?
Yeah. That's super cool. I wish we had more time to talk about it, but we have to get on to other projects. So thanks so much for putting this together and for coming on the show. If you're going to be at Handmade Seattle, then I would love to chat more about it, see more stuff, and like I would love to see, whatever those ambitions are that you have for this. Like it's really interesting to me. And it's something that I'd love to see explored further, and the ideas, brought more to completion. So thanks again for being on.
It's definitely sort of the video I have there's a little bit anemic. I apologize, but
no, you're good.
Hopefully
there
can be more in the future.
Yeah, it's really cool to see it coming together. So thanks so much for coming on. We do not have a video in between our next two interviews here, so give me just a moment while I bring on our next guest, Wassim Alhajomar, who is the creator of a handmade project called Cactus Image Viewer. One moment while I make sure that he's good to go on the stream.
Can you see me?
We are doing great here. So one moment here.
Hi.
I've been Firefoxed. You are upside down. So,
Oh.
pardon me. Well, no, you're good. You're good. I've rotated you, and we are now
Cool.
good to go. So,
Cool.
thanks for coming on.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Oh no, I need to rotate you in this scene too. Every scene is going to be modified here. All right. I think now we're good. So you made this project called Cactus Image Viewer, and this is take me through this project actually, because I believe it has been around for a little bit, but then you like really, overhauled it and revamped it for the jam in some really cool ways.
Yeah, the original idea came from me frustrated with the status of most image viewers, and of course the Microsoft Image Viewer. That thing is slow. You click on an image and it takes like a few seconds to load, and it feels heavy, feels hard to use. And partly the reason behind I wanted to make all of this is to make something that I would use every day, like something as my daily driver. So originally I started this, as you know, a while ago, I think a year or so ago, and it was I'm using the DRM GUI library, and I set up something using STB image. So like it was basic, could load a few formats, and I pushed it. But then like during the jam, it was coincidentally had some time to work on it again. And during the time I had worked in UIs from scratch and stuff. So thought I would put the whole thing entirely in my own UI system, and and that basically sprawled to adding more features, supporting more file formats, finishing it off. I like to, when I'm starting something, to wrap it up in a way that it's usable and released in a sense. So yeah.
So why don't you show us what it looks like? Show us how it works. I see you've got a nice folder of test images here.
Yeah. So here is it's a standalone application. It's you can just double click it, open it, and drag and drop a file, or click open and it fires it up. Drag and drop a file here, it loads it. It's got a few nice features, like you have the basics, zooming and zooming to the mouse cursor thingy. You can turn off individual channels, take a look at them. You can rotate the image. Also, one of the most requested features for me has been something that allows me to view pixel art easily, and at the same time support something that will just the filtering is the biggest deal. So I have here just a toggle to switch between nearest and linear. So like whenever you want to take a look, and you can even turn off a grid, and you can just basically see all of them pixels, which has been something very useful for working on pixel art games.
Yeah, it is so sad when you open up some kind of pixel image and you're just left with this blurry mess.
It's a blur.
Yeah,
it's a blob there. So that was the basic use. You can also inspect the colors. You can just hover, middle click with the mouse, or hold Control to inspect any color. It shows you the values. You can right click to copy the hex code. Some basic stuff, basically.
These are all like so many little quality of life things that I have needed for so long. It's such a pain to like, I want to, do slightly more than just checking if this is the correct image. Well, let me boot up all of Photoshop so that I can like do the eyedropper and copy one thing out, right?
Yes, and you have to wait for a whole thing. And speaking of Photoshop, there's a few nice editing features I added to this thing. Because like the idea about the editing, you know how easy it is on your phone when you take a picture to crop it, change a few values, and save it. Like that's something so straightforward, and it's mind-boggling that we don't have something that straightforward on like desktop, which should be like this huge, powerful machine. I don't think I need to fire up Photoshop just to crop an image. So you can enter crop mode with C, right? Pressing C or in the edit menu. And then you can basically drag and drag the whole box and set the dimensions you need. It's also, one pixel at a time. You can set it, and when you're done, you hit C again, and it's cropped, but it's not saved. So like it's just like work in progress what you're doing. When you're done editing, you can click Save, and choose the codec you want to save it in, and then you save the image. So like here we can say output.png and hit save. And then when we're out, it should be here. Where is it?
Yep, it's in
here.
the
It is output.png. It's in the middle. Yeah, so like it does something like that. It also saves the rotation. There's also you can edit the hue of the image, saturation, contrast, brightness, gamma. You can also render it in base as sRGB. And you can also have blur, which is you can a basic Gaussian blur that you can add to the image, and all of this will be when you do whatever crazy stuff when you save it. It will be saved as well, and we have it there. It was quite fun to figure out the shader stuff because all of this is being done in the shader. All the editing stuff is on the shader, including your cropping and everything. It has like a multi-threaded loader, so like the UI still works while it's loading the image. It can load a huge number of file formats because I switched to using Windows Image Component, which basically means whatever Windows can support, this can support. So if you need like a specific codec, like HEIF or raw codecs, like for example, this is a raw image, this is NEF.
This thing can
you
open
just
RAWs?
basically go to the. It can open RAWs, but you have to install the codec. So if you go to Microsoft's store and then download the codec, it's for free, and we fire up this thing, it will work, and you have it. It's here, and all the editing still works with them, and the Gaussian blur and stuff. And speaking of that, it also doesn't run on idle. So like when you're idle, it basically slows down and stops. It's no longer there. It's going down.
Yeah,
and
that is a really common
like
pitfall for these handmade projects.
Yeah,
I have
because
to
it
say.
it fries everything otherwise. But the cool thing about that is, despite all of this, the UI animation still works fine. So like UI animation handles that. It like basically forces it to keep running until the animations are over. And on all of this UI is immediate mode as well. So like this is based on Ryan Fleury's ideas and stuff.
Sure.
And you can set the background. This is also a widget also made in the IM library, which is all open source. You can guys find it on my repo. All of this is open source and for free.
Shout out your GitHub username or something.
It's with Simulator.
Okay.
WASSIM.
Find that link.
You can fit the image to width, to height, fit it inside of the frame. You can have a histogram as well of the current image that you have and filter based on whatever you want to look at. You can zoom in and zoom out in the histogram.
Does the histogram update live while you edit the image? Does it update live?
That doesn't. No, it doesn't do that.
Feature request then.
I haven't
that's my feature
implemented
request.
that yet.
Oh, well.
Because that thing requires, while I load it, I load it into the CPU memory as raw image data, and then I remove it and I free the memory.
Okay.
Yeah, and I do it on the GPU. So
all right, fair
if
enough.
I have to do that, it'll be a bit more, but it's not impossible. So other stuff you can do is there's a few things you can change here. You can set like how the image viewer behaves when you switch the image, reset position, or save the position of each file, or the zoom of each file. You can set the checkerbox colors. You can choose different themes for this UI as well. We have like purple, crimson, black.
This is so good.
Or we can even have a light theme as well.
For me,
I like the
just for
crimson
me.
black. Yes. Yeah, like you can hide. It also has like full screen mode. I'm not gonna press it to not break anything, but like you can hide the status bar. Yeah. It also sorts the files based on their sorting order in the file in the folder itself. So the folder like sort by name or by date. It will pick up that as well.
Nice.
Yep.
So you can use this for this is great. I have to ask then, like, the Windows Image Viewer is just one of many programs that Microsoft has failed to make or failed to make good. Do you have ambitions for other programs in the Cactus family of products?
What I want to do is I want write a front end for FFmpeg. So like something where you basically a converter that uses FFmpeg, but because FFmpeg is very there's a lot of friction in using it. So you have to know how to type the command, and it's hard and it's not intuitive. Like a basic thing that you want to do is like Discord's 8 megabytes limit and you have a video that's 14 megabytes. All you care about is making it smaller. So that should be a functionality that somehow comes up with a good heuristic that will size it down for you. Something like that, and that's something I want to do in the future at some point, but that's a little bit later. Other stuff we can do is you can view GIFs.
All right,
or GIFs. However
we only have so long in this demo here for you to show off all these features, man. Come on.
Sorry, I'll be quick. You can pause and go individual frames. The same rules apply with the nearest and whatever. And I don't know if I forgot everything, but I think that covers most. Oh, you can also have there's keyboard controls as well. Like you can zoom in and out with the keyboard, move it, and also control the everything. So yeah. We're looking at a lot of cacti here.
Asaf is pointing out a good thing. I've literally not seen one other image viewer that lets you step through the frames of a GIF. Like
yeah, it's such a simple thing. Like you're already going through them when they're viewing it, right? Like you're already loading them and viewing them, and this is just allows you to go through them like that. And yeah. Also transparency, you can toggle it. Oh, you see weird shit if you disable the alpha channel. You see like whatever.
Funny thing too. I think we're about to see more of this kind of thing. Soon.
Yeah.
so I'm looking forward to that. Well, honestly, like that. I mean, that's a fantastic demo, and
thank you.
It's
very
a fantastic
much.
program. It makes me really happy to see this thing put together.
Thank you.
For those who are unfamiliar, this is not like Wassim's first handmade project that he's created. You may also know him as the creator of AV Racer, a 2D racing game that you can go buy on Steam right now. He's also a literal surgeon, like in real life. I don't know where he finds the time for this outside of, surgery, but it's super impressive to see. So
that's very kind of you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ben.
So thanks so much, Wassim, for coming on.
I'm very happy. Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
And you all can go download Cactus Viewer from the link that Asaf shared above. It's a program you can put on your computer today, and it is way better than the Windows image viewer. So go download that. Thanks again for being on the show. We're now going to go over to a demo of a project called Soundmaker by user icylava. So take it away, icylava.
This is Soundmaker. It's a modular audio synthesis and processing program. The name and design are inspired by Material Maker, which has a similar graph-based interface. I made it because I wanted a simple and fast way to create sounds from scratch, as most audio software today is centered around creating music instead. Of course, that's not to say that Soundmaker can't make music, though it could use some additions to help with that, such as a sequencer. In Soundmaker, everything is a signal. You can think of a signal as an audio wave, though signals are not always audible. Signals are generated by oscillators and recorders, and then processed by other modules. Some modules use signals crossing a certain threshold as a trigger. For example, you can use signals to start and stop the playing of a recorder. One thing I immediately decided when starting the project is to stay as far away from skeuomorphic design as possible, and instead go for a clean, minimalistic look. This is for two reasons. First, I think skeuomorphic design is super ugly. Second, I believe it can lead to a worse user experience. Often audio software is littered with knobs, sliders, and buttons for changing various parameters, with the excuse that you should be using your ears instead of your eyes for gauging the sound. I think this is a missed opportunity. Take a look at these two effects from Ableton Live. They both serve a similar purpose, but clearly the one on the right has a superior design, as you can control both the gain and the frequency of a filter at the same time. Not to mention the display lets you see what's actually happening to the sound, whereas on the left, all you get is some LEDs as feedback. Of course, Soundmaker doesn't do much to address these problems. After all, it's full of sliders. But that's the mindset that I had when making this program. And due to the limited time of the jam, I wasn't able to give each module the attention it needed. I did make custom widgets where it was the most important to have them. and I will be revamping the various modules to be more visual and intuitive to use in the future. Anyway, I will now leave you with the sounds of SoundMaker. Enjoy!
All right, very cool project from icylava there, SoundMaker. Thanks so much for submitting that. And now I am here with Marc Laroussini, or I Make Music on the Discord, with a really fun project called badpaint. So yeah, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you.
So tell me about this project. I loved seeing the updates from this project throughout the jam, because you had some great results really early. But what was like the motivation for this?
I was surprised how quickly we got to cool results from all this. So yeah, the motivation for this was to create a image glitcher distortion tool that was in real time. Because I had seen online, things you could do with images, like this, for example, where you can corrupt the image and get these really, really pretty glitch effects. But the only tools that I could figure out how to use would be like you type into a Python script and then you get an image and it looks cool, but like you kind of want to like try it again and try to get different results. And that process just felt really clunky. So I was thinking, well, like what if you like could do that in real time? Like if you could like paint data into it or something. And I only had like a vague idea what that meant. So in the jam, I made an app that did that and just kind of played around with what that might look like, and very quickly found something like that does that in a really cool way. So I can drag an image onto here, and the idea is that this top image is the resulting image, and the bottom here is it has converted this into a PNG, and this is only halfway through the conversion. First, it does a filtering of the different scan lines, and that's what you're seeing here. This data that's sort of in this compressed way, and then later it has this other compression step. But what you can do is paint on it, and it makes distortions. It just messes it up. You paint it, and it's bad. So this red color here, these paint brushes or these different colors represent different ways that you're altering the data. Red here just means that you're taking away data. And these are just chosen kind of arbitrarily. The actual effects I chose on like the last 2 days, because the rest of it was just like figuring out what this even is and like, or how to convert a PNG and code a PNG and multi-threading and all that. But yeah, the red is just taking away data and turning it into zeros. Black represents 0, white represents something that's close to 1, and this is showing values 0 to 255. And for some reason, most of them just are 255, but it shows up as either black or white. But yeah, other things that you could do, you can add pixels. So this is just adding 1. Yeah, so this is new. That takes away, this just adds 1. So if you notice, it kind of looks like it's it's hard to tell because like the compression does its compression stuff and makes it just totally messed up because you're messing with the data in a way that was never intended. But yeah, it kind of looks like you're adding stuff.
Yeah, but it's
But yeah,
so funny
I'm
how
now
you
literally
still
adding.
do see the basic structure of it, right? And you see
Yeah.
that structure
Mhm.
erode in this really interesting
Mhm.
way.
Yeah, and you can erase. And this is erasing just the effects you've done. It's not erasing.
Right.
So like there's the 2 layers here. Another one I have here is shift. This just shifts the pixels over, or I say pixels. It's really shifting the data over, because the idea here is you're manipulating not pixels but just raw data. So like if I color this whole thing in, notice
Then it
Handmade has gone
reassembles
to the left
itself
a little
off
bit.
to like
Yeah.
what?
Yeah, yeah. So like if I show the A here,
So
like
good.
now the A is and then random, I thought, well, you can move stuff over. What if you just like put random pixels in, and that's random data.
It looks like it, yeah.
Yeah. So the cool thing about this is you can also do this with transparent images. And to do that, I just drag the image on the window and it loads itself. And something unexpected from this project is it visualizes how the compression works. Like you can see here, these white dots. Like I don't know anything about PNG compression, but from looking at this image, hey, you now can intuit something about how PNG compression works, encoding works, because well, look, there's some data over here, and it represents something. And if I remove that data, like it's gone. Like there's some data here that represents
Whoa.
that scan line. Yeah.
Whoa, that is
Yeah.
wild. So what we're
Yeah.
seeing there is like, are you like erasing a palette or something? Like, is that what's going on?
Yeah. So I guess like I haven't gone to the trouble to like look that up. Because part of it is that my own philosophy in making this tool is to not really care about the specifics and instead just have a tool that where you can manipulate data and what comes out is what comes out.
Right. Right, but no,
'Cause
but
that's the
it's
sort of
still really
philosophy
cool
of
to
glitch.
see.
Yeah.
I'd actually like to talk more about this like intermediate thing that you're drawing on, because you said it's like an intermediate step. How did you?
Yeah. So I so the first thing I did was just to have a white canvas. I was thinking, well, I'm not sure what to put there, so I'll just have it be white. And then I got the painting working, and then I started playing around with, well, what if we like put the image there and it was like half opacity? And as I was coding that, I realized, wait, I could put the data that I'm actually manipulating in the image, and through just happenstance, I found a way to display it. Like the first time I displayed it, it looked kind of like the image but messed up. Like it had the width and height wrong, and I played with the numbers until, oh wait, that's the image. I just sort of stumbled upon displaying the image, and it looks
Yeah.
like the same thing.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
I was really interested by that, like when you were sharing these updates in the jam, where it's like, oh, what is this weird, like, I would hardly know how to describe it, but it's like this it's almost like when you do the spectrograms of sounds, except for an
Mhm.
image. I don't know if that may be like
Yeah,
literally true. Somebody who knows more about
I realized
PNG, tell me, but like,
I should explain a little bit more what this is. So this represents every pixel is 1 byte
of this intermediate
and
format of some
of
kind.
this intermediate format. And
oh, is that why it's
I'm
wider?
not sure.
Is it just because of like?
Yeah, so
like
that's
the
why it's
different-
wider.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
because 4 pixels. Yeah, because it's 4 times as wide.
Gotcha.
So yeah, it's doing red, green, blue, alpha.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and just when you like if you notice like there's a lot of more detail here, that's because in this optimal encoding of the image, it just encodes that in a way that has to capture more of that data. Like if I put in this transparent shape, you notice like there's not that much data there because in the compression, it only needs to put values in certain places to capture that same image.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, that is
something
super
else
fun.
that's really
oh
cool.
yeah, go ahead.
If you put in an image that you edited, you can see the changes that you made.
Right, interesting.
So I
right,
exported an image
because
here.
before it would have been showing the red over that because you were painting it
Yeah.
out. But after saving it, when you load it back up, you see literally that, right? That's so cool. Yeah. So you can actually, I suppose, use this to hide messages in glitched PNGs.
Yeah.
which is fantastic. And yeah, the results that you've been sharing with this are so cool. I mean, like it is wild to see this stuff. I'd heard of this before. It's just so interesting to see that fusion of like, here's something that's been, like you said, it's just this realm of like weird programmery tools to, that are always used for this kind of thing, but artistic results, and it's only very few people who can actually like put that together in any sort of interesting way, because it's rare to find people who are more artistically interested in that kind of thing but are actually willing to set up a Python script or something. So stuff like this is just so cool to see this kind of thing be made. I mean, not just interactive, real time, like all of it. Like it's just right there in front of you, and you can actually just play with it instead of poking at bytes in a hex editor. It's so cool. It's really great. So, is this available for people to download or just private for now? Okay.
Yeah. I released it. I wanted to make a primary release just so that like as soon as I was showing stuff, like people wanted to like play with it, like artists I was showing this to. It has a crash handler, and that's broken because something was spamming it. I'm not sure if that was like a bot or like the program itself, but if it crashes, that will not work. But otherwise, yeah, it works. And for the future, there's a lot more I want to do with this and iterate on these tools. Like it would be really cool if you had layers like in Photoshop, so you could have different compressions and like what if there's something with JPEG that's interesting you could do with, because this is just one type of manipulation,
right?
And also like this is sort of in my mind like a parody of MS Paint, in the UI, and like the text is chosen to do that. So like it would be nice if you had like the bucket tool and the rectangle tool and
yeah, that would be funny. Yeah. Just lean in. Oh, can we need the like old MS Paint airbrush tool where you can just sort of like spray pixels on the image. I actually think that could work great here. That'd be really fun.
Yeah. And there's also like I'm sure other tools that are not MS Paint, but stuff that's more geared towards manipulating an image in this way that could be interesting. Like what if it was like a sphere that you could this was kind of with random, but like randomly just put data in that's not like a bubble, but like a whole area, and it just randomly puts pixels in. Like stuff like that would be really cool.
Yeah. Well, I would love to see that kind of thing develop in the future. I mean, this is a fantastic result for just a week of work. I'm so glad that it worked out and that you were able to put it together. So thanks so much for joining us. You can share any other links and stuff you want in chat. Oh my god, that's so cursed.
You can break the image too.
that is so wild. All right, well, thanks so much. I'm gonna cut over to my little transition scene here. As before, we actually don't have a video in between these. The next thing that we're going to be doing is a brief discussion of Orca with Martin Fouilleul, the Orca project lead. And then after that, we will have one more video demo for everybody before we wrap up today. So give me just a second while I shuffle things around here, get my screen share going. It seems that we are already good. So welcome to the show, Martin.
Hi.
Good to have you. For those who don't know, why don't you introduce yourself and Orca, and in the meantime, I will be frantically figuring out how to screen share my own Jam project.
Sure. So Orca, it's a runtime for portable sandbox apps, and we're using WebAssembly, but without all the web stack. So essentially, we are trying to rethink how you would do like portable apps that normally you would do like through a browser, but without having to like pull in all the complexities of the web, without having to deal with HTML, CSS, JavaScript. And we just want to be able to write a program in whatever language and using whatever toolchain you want, and produce like a WebAssembly module. And then we have a runtime, and we have a bundler script that will bundle this runtime and the WebAssembly module and produce a standalone application. So you can think of that as a handmade electron, if you will, or an electron without all the web technology. So that's basically what Orca is. It is like at this stage, it is that. Later on, we want to also have a launcher that centralizes all the runtimes and that actually allows you to download WebAssembly modules from untrusted developers and run them in a trusted runtime with the guarantee that it will be properly sandboxed and won't mess up with your computer. So recently we opened our code base and we made available a very early minimum viable project. And so we had a number of people trying to build a runtime, trying to use that in the project. So thanks to all the people who tested this, and your feedback is super useful and we're acting on it. And I think, Ben, you actually did your Jam project in Orca.
Correct. So I mean, we're flipping the interview around here a little bit. So I wanted to make I wanted to do a new take on a Git program, on a visual Git program, because in my opinion, the visual Git programs I've used, whether that's like SourceTree or Sublime Merge or Tower or whatever, they all seem to me to stick too closely to the model that the terminal UI presents, right down to the way that they view the graph of commits, which doesn't seem very useful to me. Now, the disclaimer on all this is that I did not actually get that far with my project during the jam time. Unfortunately, due to time constraints, I just wasn't really able to do that much with it. But I did do it in Orca, and I got it running on 2 different devices. I've got another laptop down there that is also running this thing, and I can switch to screen sharing that in a second. But what you're seeing here is, as Martin was describing, a WebAssembly application, but running outside the browser on this new Orca runtime with its own Orca graphics stack and that kind of thing. So you can see here, these are actually viewing the history of commits in this test repo that I made. And the thing that I wanted to do was to be able to, so one of the things I wanted to do was to make the commit graph more interesting by, instead of presenting everything chronologically, I wanted to show you kind of the shape of history within your repository. And so you can, instead of just seeing everything at once, kind of hover over things, see what the commit is at the end of each branch. If you want to expand something, then you can just pop it open. The whole thing kind of lays out to account for that. And this all gets you basically the exact same experience if you switch over to the Mac here. You can see it is like exactly the same kind of application here. It's using a different repository here, but you can still expand it out. And this is in part actually the history of my Jam project here. So it did at least end up parsing Git data, but you can see that the experience here on multiple devices is like exactly the same, because that's the point of Orca, right? So there is not really much else to show here, unfortunately. Like I said, I just didn't really have time during the jam to do it. But aside from some workflow issues, which I guess we can talk about if we want, the actual experience of using Orca, thumbs up. I was able to draw stuff really easily, get input really easily, do my little UI thing here. So yeah.
Sure. Well, maybe just before we talk about what went into that and like the difficulties you stumbled upon with the Orca tooling and so on, actually, this made me think that, like, yes, as you said, like once you are doing like a visual front end for Git, you have like a huge possibility space of showing the history in different ways and retaining more information about like the branching structure of your repo, which other Git clients don't really do. And so, for example, if you're working on a project and collaborating with people through PRs, you kind of have to choose either to like merge those PRs, but then your history is all like branching and merging and not linear, and it may be confusing. Or you can like rebase and forward. But if you do that, you kind of lose like the collaboration history, because like you can have a series of commits and you have nothing that tells you really that these commits were parts of the same PR. And so what people do is that like they squash their history just to like condense that and have like one commit that represents the action of doing that PR. But what you have there is basically showing that you don't need to do that, which is annoying because you can't bisect and inspect different commits inside that PR. Instead, you could just like collapse that and have that handled by the client, and not have to like mess up the history of the repo. So I think that there's a lot of things to imagine in that space.
Yeah, the reason the actual workflow that I wanted to do that I didn't get to because I spent so much time parsing Git logs and building graphs, which arguably I should just have not done, was I wanted to be able to like box select to like click and drag a range of commits, drag them out into like scratch space, click and drag to rearrange them, to do the sorts of things that you would do in like an interactive rebase, and then like drag them back onto another commit, and then it would like actually apply the rebase from there. And the stuff you were mentioning about like losing some context when you squash stuff or when you rebase stuff, huge problem in my opinion. Like there's really no reason that when you squash commits together, you should totally lose the information about the commits they came from. Those commits are still in the Git database. They could be referenced, but they're just not. Like, maybe if you're lucky you get a note somewhere, but like maybe probably not.
That might like require some support from Git, but I think you could actually get away with just putting like markers in Git commit messages, like to mark sections that you want to be like collapsed by default in your view, and things like that that could still like piggyback on actual like existing Git, but inform the front end that okay, this section like was merged or this section was rebased, but actually it was based on this commit.
For sure.
This number of commits should be collapsed and so on. So yeah, I think there's a lot of stuff to do, and I hope you continue working on that.
I hope I do too. I gotta, it is a project I'd like to continue working on. It's one that I've had in my backlog for a long time. And there are even some things within Git that could allow this really naturally, but that aren't really being used right now. Did you know Git has a notes feature that allows you to associate like other commits on the side with main commits, and they're just commits, but they're note commits, and they kind of get pushed and handled differently. They exist. You could just put this metadata in them, but people don't right now. There's some proposal for like meta commits. There's like there's a bunch of options. It could totally do it, but people don't. I also learned from some coworkers
anything
that,
like is possible.
Yeah.
But the UX doesn't let you do that. Yeah.
Right.
So.
And the other, I know that Mercurial has some decent workflow things that Git users like myself just don't even know about. But my coworkers are like, why are you making such a big deal out of this? You just use mercurial whatever command and it's easy. And it's like, oh man, I guess it is. I didn't even realize. So so to wrap this up, I guess, let's just I'll briefly show the Orca website here. Oh shoot, your audio isn't on that scene. No, I can't do that. Hold on. Or no, I can't.
Oh.
I've got, what scenes do I even have in here? No, I have this one. We're good. So the website is orca-app.dev. Martin, you can do the closing pitch on that.
Yeah, sure. So so we didn't like go into the details, but most of the feedback that people gave is that their like issue is like the tooling. Right now you have to build the runtime. So that's like the next step for the project is build tools improvements, basically. We want to build the runtime binaries in CI and just provide the binaries so that people that are making applications can just download the binaries, download the bundling tools, and they don't have to deal with building the runtime ever. And yeah, and then the next big step, I think, is improving like the debugging story of Orca, because right now debugging stuff that happens in WebAssembly is a problem. You can't use like a debugger because it's just like a VM that we completely control, and like the WebAssembly is just like a blob of data that your debugger can't see inside. So, and since we control all the format of the application and the runtime, we have room to improve like the debugging experience and give you essentially live debugging inside the application itself. So that's what we are going to work on in the coming month, I guess.
Yeah.
There are also like just a couple news for people that have been like trying to use Orca. We changed the repository. We were on the Handmade network Gitya. We are now on GitHub repo. We also changed the license to a more permissive one. So if you had any concerns about like the license being too restrictive, no, it's just like a dual licensing with MIT license, so you can basically do whatever you want. And we also have you can like support the project on GitHub sponsor if you think it is cool or important and you want to help us develop the project. So that's it.
Yep. And if you want to get more news, then go to orcaapp.dev and sign up for the Orca newsletter. So you'll be kept up to speed on all that. So thanks so much for being here. As I said, we have one final video to show. It is a really cool project called ZUnderglow by community member Jonadu, who goes by Zeanith on Discord. Super fun one to wrap up the show with. I'll have just a couple closing words afterward. But let's go ahead and view ZUnderglow.
Hello everyone, this is ZUnderglow, an application to control, configure, and program underglow lighting for vehicles. The main motivation for my project was, one, underglow lighting is objectively cool, okay? So I use this jam as an excuse, really, to install underglow and experiment. Secondly, though, it's a gripe of mine, terrible RGB software. I'm a fan of this product space. I think the hardware is really cool, and addressable LEDs are a cool technology. But not to call anybody out in particular, the software is generally bloated, inefficient, or some of them require accounts, right? For like weird reasons and basic functionality. It shouldn't be this complicated, so it's a bit of a mess. Finally, the lack of programmability. These things should be dead simple to program, and I wanted to showcase that in my project. So this is the application. We have an initial setup page with network settings for the LED receiver and LED strip orientation buttons for the vehicle. You don't actually do anything. But we also have some presets, master switch to turn them on and off, static mode, some theoretical effects, these aren't programmed either, but you get the idea. And a base mode, let me just demonstrate that quick. Huge thank you to Nact from the community. He let me use his integrate demo music. So here it is. And yeah, you can adjust the smoothing if you want it crazy, or the base max, if it's clipping. But finally, I want to demonstrate the custom layer. This was meant to be the killer feature of this app, and it's a live reload render function, and so you can just change it, to whatever you want, and it'll update. So this will update the LEDs, or whatever's displaying on the right. One problem I encountered with this, though, I initially wanted all of Raylib's functions to be accessible here so that you could kind of, even access Ray GUI and, create whatever you want. That didn't work out. I thought you could just link it and it would be fine. It's not fine. So I need to figure that out. I just left it as a naked function for now. In terms of future upgrades, one thing I really want to add if I come back to this seriously is a way to have array of vehicles, right? And so you could treat them all as one frame buffer, really, and just kind of push out packets and have them sync. That would be so cool. But let's move on to the hardware so I can give you an overview of that. So here we are outside. You can see the LEDs are connected. The flickering is due to a hardware issue. I encountered this during the jam. I'm not 100% sure what's causing it, but I believe the first LED in the array is sending a wrong signal somehow. And so I tested it with another strip and it works fine, yeah, so I need to debug that. But here I'm just trying to send a live reload, so you can see it was blue before. If I change it to the rainbow function, it's white. That's not because it's wrong, it's because the rainbow is diffusing to white. I should have increased the spacing between the colors. But yeah, that's about it. I'm about to test the base view mode. So to end the video, I'll play a quick montage of this build video I made 2 days before the jam ended. I wanted to get this money shot with the car moving and the lights working. Thank you to the second member of the Handmade Network who donated some music that I could use. They wish to remain uncredited, so thank you, uncredited individual. I had a ton of fun this jam, and thank you, admin team, for putting this all together.
Wild applause. Amazing work by Zeanith and everybody who participated in this jam. This is a fantastic result. I'm so happy that we get to do this jam every year, that so many people always turn up with so many creative and different ideas, that we can have, SDF modeling and image viewers and build servers and programmable LEDs and so many different amazing things, so many exciting ideas explored in just a week. It is just so gratifying as the community lead and the admin team to see turnout like this literally every single time. So huge thanks to every single person who participated. If you want to see all of the submissions, you can go to, as I shared the link before, handmade.network/jam. Everything is over there. Every single project submission can be found here. All the ones that you saw, plus many more. So please do go check that out. The recording of this stream will be going up at some point soon as well, as soon as we can get it put up on YouTube and, time-stamped with everything. That'll be going up there so you can, share with your friends and show off all this amazing work that you did. So the one final thing before we go, in just about a month, almost exactly a month from now, we will have Handmade Seattle. That is the conference organized by Abner Coimbre. It is the flagship Handmade conference every year. It is, what is this? Is that the 4th year of the conference? I think? I don't know. Abner in chat, who is Handmade Cities in chat, can correct me on that. But just a few tickets are still available. The conference will be streaming online as well as in person. If you are in the Seattle area, I really encourage you to check it out. Or, of course, if you can't attend, then you can still attend online. If you buy a ticket for online attendance, it gives you access to the conference Q&A, so you can interact with the speakers, as well as some other opportunities that I'm sure Abner would be happy to tell you about and that you can find on the website. That is handmadecities.com, specifically handmadecities.com/Seattle. So please go check that out. I'm looking forward to seeing so many people in person in a month. So with that, I will leave you all. Thanks so much for being here, participating in the jam. See you at Handmade Seattle, and see you again for our next jam. Join the Discord so you'll hear about when that is. See ya.